Chase, the Niners, we titled the stream Where the Niners Need to Get Better Before the Season Begins, before we go in any direction. What did you think of yesterday's joint practice with the Broncos?
Look, what a good litmus test for this Niners offense. I mean, that Broncos defense last year under defensive coordinator Vance Joseph was really good. And they were great in regular statistical categories. And then if you look at some of the advanced numbers and the analytics, they were also very sound there. And so going into this preseason game on Saturday night with the starters not playing, teams have started to handle and approach these joint practices like the preseason games, because that's when the starters are going up against the starters. It can be a controlled environment. You're not tackling quarterbacks to the ground. The physicality isn't the same, but scheme versus scheme, players versus players, coaches versus coaches. This is a really great way to analyze where the Broncos are. Playoff team, ended that drought last year. Bo Nix, Sean Payton, that defense, and this Niners team, which is looking to bounce back. So no surprises really that the Niners started slow, and then in the move the ball periods, they started to get a little bit better. This is an offense that can be rhythmic at times. This is an offense that is introducing new parts, especially at the wide receiver position. Trent Williams not out there. And so you're trying to get a feel for what you're trying to do and accomplish offensively. And when you're going up against a really good defense, no surprises that the Niners maybe started a little bit slow. But some of the things that you like to see, Ricky Pearsall winning one-on-ones, Jordan Watkins winning one-on-ones, Christian McCaffrey looking good, Brock Purdy making mistakes, but also handling adversity, not letting his confidence crash, coming back at the end of practice to deliver some nice balls. And Purdy, team drill, 7-on-7s, one-on-ones. You're seeing him make big boy, high-level, elite quarterback throws. And outside of that, to see Ricky Pearsall having success, huge for this entire organization and this offense going into 2025. They badly need him to stay healthy and live up to the billing of being a first-round pick with all of the whiffs that they've had with crucial selections in the NFL draft. And then a player like Jordan Watkins displaying the 4.3 speed, the ball tracking ability to beat the DB in a one-on-one, hand fighting, using some physicality with that 4.3 speed to win that matchup. You know, these are the types of developments that I really want to see from this offense. And these are the things that they're capable of doing, Larry. And I'm sure that, you know, you have some great analysis too from being there on the sideline.
Well, I mean, just, it was an interesting practice from the standpoint of it started off with in the one-on-one period with the Niner D-line. And I watched the Niner D-line against the Denver O-line.
Yeah.
And
you're a trench guy, and I love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. I'm definitely a trench guy, but you had to choose. I could have gone and watched the Niner O-line against Denver's D-line, but I watched the Niner D-line against Denver's O-line. And I wanted to see, how they would do. And I thought Alfred Collins had his best day yet. Right. CJ West was really good, and Sebastian Valdez just continues to destroy people. He absolutely cooked this guy Powers, who's a starter for Denver on their line, and to the point where everybody was just kind of like, gasping, like, how did he beat this guy so severely, so completely? So I thought it started really well with the young Niner D line really holding their own against Quinn Miners and the Bronco, offensive line, which is a pretty, I don't know, how good is Denver's O-line in your opinion?
One of the best in the NFL. I mean, last year they were fantastic. So across the board, they are very, very sound. Sean Payton emphasizes the O-line, and they're coached up very well.
So that was the first thing. So I'm feeling really good early on. Then we get to the team portion, and it just was, of the first 10 plays, like 9 of them were advantage Denver's defense. Mm-hmm. Denver was getting lots of push. Now, granted, there was no Trent Williams in the 11-on-11s. They held him out. So you had Burford at left tackle, but the Niners are getting beat all along the line of scrimmage. Nick Bonito, DJ Jones, Myers Franklin, whatever Franklin Myers, whatever John Franklin Myers or Myers Franklin. I mean, these guys were all winning reps up front pretty consistently against the Niners offensive line. Purdy had no time to throw. The running backs were getting dumped in the backfield, tackled for losses. Purdy was getting sacked or would be getting sacked, and when he wasn't getting sacked, he was throwing into ridiculously tight windows. They were getting their hands on a number of footballs. There were very few. The first positive play was Purdy did a little bootleg, which he's completed this pass to George Kittle with ease against the Niners secondary, and he barely got it to him through a sea of hands. George had to dive and to make the catch. I mean, it took a Herculean effort by both Purdy and Kittle just to complete one pass on Denver's defense. Now, that was initial. That was the initial 10, 15 plays, like almost of the initial 15 plays, maybe there were 13 wins for the Broncos D against the Niners.
Blanked in the red zone too, right?
What's that?
Blanked in the red zone as well too, right? For the first period, the
right.
Niners were, yeah,
right, yeah, and then it started to loosen up, and then Purdy started to find Watkins, started to find Robinson, started to find Pearsall. Purdy threw a couple picks, but you know what? I mean, people are like, how come you don't talk about the picks? I don't talk about the picks because it's really more about what's happening up front, and it's practice. So you're going to throw the ball. In the game, you wouldn't throw that. You would just take the sack and move on to the next down. In practice, you're going to give you're trying to practice. So it's not just about you, it's about the receiver, the DB, and all the other guys in the field. So you're going to throw that ball. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't, the interceptions weren't like, hey, I lost track of defenders, or I'm inaccurate with the ball. It was that the defense was, you got to credit the D. They had a lot of pressure up front. They had tight coverage on the back end, and he threw the ball anyway. And a couple of them got tipped, and a couple of them got picked off. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way, but I just don't. To me, it's almost like team interceptions when you see that kind of pressure in the quarterback's face and just see him kind of throw it to the spot.
Right.
So I didn't think Purdy looked great, but I didn't think Purdy looked terrible. He definitely had a lower completion percentage. But then I watched Mac Jones, and Mac Jones against the same D. Now, granted, it was the twos a lot of times. Really looked good. I mean, I don't know what he completed, but it was a high percentage. And he's playing, the one thing about Jones is that he's playing under control with, he's definitely playing with poise. But the word I would use, or the phrase, is on time. I mean, he's on time. The ball's coming out on time with accuracy. He knows how to read coverage, and it's coming out at the right place at the right time. So I asked Shanahan about it after practice, and he said, yeah, Mac's looking good. So I didn't expect Jones to look this good year one in an offense where Matt Ryan struggled at the beginning, and
right.
Other guys struggle. And it's like Mac Jones is not struggling initially. What do you make of that?
It's a great sign for San Francisco. I mean, they got him at a really good price for the next 2 years, and he is definitely a better backup quarterback when he's playing well than Joshua Dobbs, and definitely Brandon Allen, who should have never, ever, ever started a game for the San Francisco 49ers last year. But look, I like this signing from the jump. I know a lot of fans take issue with Kyle Shanahan, but look, he's maximized Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard to a point where they played well for a little while. He did the same in maximizing Jimmy Garoppolo. Look at how those quarterbacks have looked with their other teams, especially Jimmy G with the Raiders. That's a Kyle Shanahan effect right there. He couldn't really develop Trey Lance. I thought he looked great last week in the Hall of Fame game against with the Los Angeles Chargers. Because he was very impressive. But look, Brock Purdy comes in, and Kyle Shanahan develops him to a point where, he's a top 10 highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And I think he is legit. I think for much of his starting tenure since he came in for Jimmy G in 2022, Purdy has played at a top 10 level. The efficiency numbers, the accuracy, the strengths that he has, the big games that he's won, I do believe wins are a quarterback stat. And so what Shanahan's done with Purdy has been fantastic. Sam Darnold credited being around Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy for why he was able to bounce back last year and nearly throw for 40 touchdowns. Sam Darnold, we're talking about, who never came close to that prior to coming to the Niners with the Panthers and with the New York Jets. So Kyle Shanahan has a track record of really developing, maximizing quarterbacks, putting them in a position to succeed. And if you can play within his scheme, if you can do the things that he likes you to do to run this offense efficiently, which is reading, diagnosing, quick decisions, get the ball out, be accurate to allow your weapons to pick up yards after the catch, combined with this running game, it is very quarterback friendly when you stay within the confines of Shanahan's system. Trey Lance didn't necessarily do that. That's why he struggled a little bit. He was also incredibly raw and never got enough opportunities. So chalk that one up as an L for both Lance and Kyle Shanahan as far as the development that we've seen under Kyle. But this is another example of Mac Jones coming in here, and he looks pretty damn good. Like, I think that he could be a starter on a few teams across the NFL. His offensive situations have not been ideal at all from a foundational scheme, player personnel, offensive play calling standpoint. His first 2 stops with New England and Jacksonville, but you're seeing the quarterback in Mac Jones that we saw at Alabama, when I know that he was surrounded by high-level NFL guys, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive linemen, who all went to the NFL for that team that won the Natty. But Mac Jones that year threw for nearly 40 touchdowns, and he had, I think, 3 to 7 interceptions that year. He was excellent. And what did he do? Get the ball out on time, accurately, be decisive, throw with touch timing and anticipation, run the offense. And Kyle Shanahan's bringing that out of him right now. And good for Mac, because this is a guy who's been through a lot so far in his NFL career.
You know, I really thought Mac Jones was one of their better acquisitions in the offseason.
Me too.
Because,
value too.
Yeah, the value, but also the motivation for Purdy and the ability. I mean, I really believe after watching Jones this camp that the 49ers could win games with Purdy and Jones.
Yeah.
Like I thought Darnold looked better, looked really good with the Niners and better than he'd ever looked before.
For sure.
But I still wasn't like of the belief, the Niners can win games with Brock or Darnold.
Right. You were like, is the interception coming at some point? Because it's a little shaky.
Right. And I kind of felt like, I mean, I kind of feel, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like Darnold kind of showed what he was in the playoffs. And I think that is Darnold. And I think, unfortunately, I think Seattle's going to have a rough year because of it. And I think Milroe's going to wind up replacing Darnold. So I'm not a believer in Darnold. But Mac Jones, I think the 49ers could win games with Mac Jones. I really do. I think he looks pretty good out there. Offensively, since we're talking about concerns, they did get whipped up front by the Denver defensive line. Now, some people would say, well, what do you expect? Denver's one of the better defenses, and this is a 49er team that's out there with no Trent Williams and an offensive line that probably needed some reinforcements and didn't get him for the most part in the draft or free agency. So what do you expect? What is your biggest concern of the 49ers offensively? Why don't we start there?
Offensively?
Yeah.
I've been saying it since 2021. Like, it's the offensive line. It is the offensive line.
Is there an individual there, Chase?
I just think since 2021, Larry, from left tackle to right tackle, it has not been good enough on a consistent basis against the most elite teams in the biggest of games when it's high-level talent against high-level talent. It let them down in the NFC Championship game in 2021 against the Rams. Aaron Donald was able to win that game by himself by getting to Jimmy G, who just tossed it up to Jermichael Hasty, and that ball got intercepted. End of the NFC Championship game. You should have won that game, right? The following year, 2022 NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles, they kicked the Niners' asses up front. That was a Philadelphia team that had 70 sacks that year, 15 more than any team in the NFL. You ignored it then. 2023, it was better. There were improvements, but then you go up against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and you give up, 17 to 20 pressures, 9 of them unblocked. Now, I know that some of that is scheme. Some of that is Spencer Burford not blocking Chris Jones. That's not the scheme. That's the player decision. That's the level of talent. That's the awareness. That's the serious nature of the offensive line position. And then last year, 2024, that offensive line was not good enough. They weren't good enough in a couple of key areas too. And when you can really determine if an offensive line is elite or not, how do you perform on 3rd down, 4th down, and in the red zone? They got handled. They got their asses kicked. Now, let me point back to the fact that part of this is a Kyle Shanahan protection issue. Part of it, though, is personnel. And the personnel hasn't been good enough. Ben Barch at left guard, Colton McKivitz at right tackle, Jake Brendel at center. I'll give McKivitz credit for being in better shape, running the hills of San Francisco, wanting to be a Pro Bowler. That's awesome. Did he get better from 2023 to 2024? Undoubtedly. So much better. Can he continue to get better? For sure. But he is still not an elite tackle and not even in that upper tier of tackles. He's probably a middle of the road type of right tackle. That's not good enough for me, in my opinion. Aaron Banks at left guard was good and bad. Jake Brendel hasn't been strong enough, especially with his anchor against some of the top defensive tackles often enough. And so it's the offensive line, because when you go up against teams like the Denver Broncos, if the Niners offensive line right now were to go up against the Philadelphia Eagles, the Minnesota Vikings, we've seen how that's played out against good defensive coordinators like Jim Schwartz, Cleveland Browns, against the Kansas City Chiefs with Steve Spagnuolo. What do those teams all have in common? Yes, great coaching on the defensive side of the ball, really great DCs, but their defensive lines are better than the Niners offensive line. And if San Francisco just addressed and emphasized this position more high draft capital, a little bit more financial capital, and prioritize getting players in the first 3 rounds at very crucial and important offensive line spots, combined with the play calling and the mind of Kyle Shanahan, combined with the talent on this offense, imagine how much better this team could be. But it's almost like organizationally, Shanahan, a former receiver, John Lynch, a safety, they just don't see the importance in the offensive line. And they're okay with it being good enough and fine. I want it to be great, and it's capable of being great. Look at what the Eagles can do, the class of the NFL, with that offensive line. And Larry, you and I have talked about this. What did they do after having the best 5 starters along the offensive line, probably left to right in the NFL? They drafted 3 offensive linemen in the 6th round, and they drafted a UDFA who you and I liked in Holland Pierce. They didn't need to address the offensive line, but they did so anyway because they believe that you win and lose games in the trenches. I have that philosophy as well when I look at the game of football. And when the Niners get their asses kicked time and time again against these great teams in the trenches, yes, I do bring it back to the offensive line mostly, and Kyle Shanahan needing to adapt and evolve with allowing these offensive linemen to change the protections and giving Brock Purdy more of that leeway. But yeah, biggest concern, offensive line for all those reasons. As you can tell, I get fired up about it.
Well, I'll tell you, I think the offensive line's an issue. I just watching Denver, I'll be interested to see how Denver pairs their roster down, because they got a backup tackle named Pauszewski, who I think could start for the Niners. They also have a backup. They got a bunch of backups. I mean, they got Frank Crum from Wyoming, Marquise Cox from Kentucky. I think these are good offensive linemen. And they're deep on Denver's, depth chart buried. So I guess my problem with the 49ers offensive line is that I don't really believe they're playing their best players. Like, I think Matt Hennessy is a better option for the Niners than Jake Brendel. Brendel's 290, underpowered. Every time he goes up against the DJ Readers of the world, they hand him his lunch.
Jalen Carter would own him.
Yeah, I mean, all the big-bodied guys own him. He's just not strong enough. And then you've got Hennessy, who's like closer to 315, sitting right there. I think Hennessy's better than Brendel. And I'm not even convinced that Nugent isn't better than Brendel. Nugent's had some very good one-on-one snaps, and I kind of like what I've seen out of Drew Moss a little bit. So I kind of think that they're not. I mean, Firster loves Brendel. Firster had Brendel in Miami. Brendel, he brought him to San Francisco, and it's a big success story because the Niners were paying Alex Mack too much and Weston Richburg too much, and they, Brendel was the cheap center that Chris found, and Kyle loves that they found this cheap center. But okay, so that was in 2020. It's now 5 years later.
Exactly.
And he's regressed, and he's not very powerful at the point. And I know he's smart. He's probably their smartest offensive lineman and this and that. But I think Hennessy just gives you more pop in the run game. And I think Nugent, has potential as well. And I think they're starting. I don't think they're starting their best at center. They disagree. They say Brendel's better 7 ways to Sunday, right? I also don't think they're starting their best left guard. I like Ben Bartch. He's a good guy. He's a tough guy. He's a great guy to talk to. But I kind of think Colby is better than him. And that Colby, Connor Colby, according to Chris Firster, he says, I said, what do you think of Colby as a pass blocker? I thought he was going to say he's a disaster because he's getting destroyed in the one-on-ones. But Chris was like, you know what? He's really good. That's his strength. I said, really? And I said, despite the one-on-ones, he's like, yeah, no, I know. He's losing a lot in the one-on-ones, But in the team drills, when it's 5 guys, he shows that he can pass protect. He's like, we saw that with Dom Pooney last year, and it enabled us to play him because we could play a guy who could pass protect. We see the same thing with Colby. So I think Colby and Pooney could be your guard tandem for the foreseeable future. And I think the Niners' best interior is Pooney at right guard, Hennessy at center, and Colby at left guard. And I think they're going to – I just don't think they're putting their best foot forward with the line that they have right now. I think that would be my biggest complaint. As far as my biggest concern with this offense is probably tackle, because Trent and McKivitz obviously are solid, but Spencer Burford is not fast enough to play tackle, and he's false starting without being called on it at least 3 or 4 times in this camp.
And why he's doing that, Larry?
Because he can't move he can't get out there.
Exactly. It's not fast enough.
But he's cheating the snap, and there is no refs, and he's not getting called for it. I'm setting the over-under on Spencer Burford false starts in the preseason at 2.5, and I'm going over.
Okay.
We'll see. It's just something to watch for. But I don't think they have a third tackle. I mean, I asked Firster, who's your swing tackle? He's like, well, we may not have a swing tackle. And really what he means is we may not have a third tackle, because Burford is a guard and they're playing him at tackle. And Pleasance, who looked amazing in the OTAs. Chase, if next May I start talking big about a guy in OTAs, I want you to come through the screen and just freaking slap me back and forth and remind me of my rule, which is the OTAs mean jack shit, because Austin Pleasance looked a monster in the OTAs. So impressive that I mentioned it to Firster, and Firster was like, I agree. He looks amazing. And he has not carried it over to camp. He's getting beat like a drum by speed, by power. I don't think he can play. So Burford, I don't think can play. Pleasance, I don't think can play. Isaiah Prince has been decent, but he kind of is a waist bender, and he does have ridiculous long arms. He's looked better than them. The guy I got to ask you about is Dillard. We haven't seen Dillard. Mm-hmm. You cover the Eagles. He was a first-round pick by the Eagles. He left there, went to Green Bay. I thought he was better in Green Bay. I liked some of the film I saw of him in Green Bay. He's here. He's hurt. They say he's coming back soon. Is Andre Dillard good enough to be that third tackle, or do the Niners need to go outside the organization? Because I don't think Pleasance or Burford can do it.
You know what this reminds me of, and I'll talk Dillard for sure because I know the player pretty well. But why didn't they just give $5 to $8 million to DJ Humphries? Like, you have $45.5 million in cap space, and Pleasance isn't good enough. Burford isn't an NFL offensive tackle. I know he played a little bit of that at UTSA, but if he's false starting, he doesn't believe in himself that he's quick enough.
Right.
So that's really concerning. And if you're trying to time the snap, you see Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata do it all the time, but that is so synchronized, and they just have that innate feel for the game. I don't think Burford has it. So you look at a player like DJ Humphries. I know primarily he played left tackle, but that's fine. Trent Williams misses a lot of time. And if you need him to play right tackle, he did so, I believe, in his rookie year or a year or two. There's no way he wouldn't have signed officially, because his agency tweeted out that he was signing with the Niners. If the Niners gave him $5 to $8 million, I mean, I would have invested in a backup offensive tackle who's been a Pro Bowler and a team captain and been in the league for a long time, and at one point was one of the top tackles in the game, for $5 to $8 million, just strictly alone as an insurance policy.
Why pay Juszczyk? Why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, seriously, you couldn't find a young fullback to throw in there and save that money and spend it on your offensive line?
You don't need to pay $5 million to a fullback in today's NFL. You just don't. The Eagles are introducing one again, and he's a UDFA who made the team a couple years ago as a linebacker and special teamer, and they're paying him, what, $300,000? That's it. $300,000 compared to $5 million.
Are the Eagles, who have an exceptional offensive line, right? Maybe the best, right? Left to right, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, Lane Johnson. I don't even know if Steen's the best right guard they have.
He had a great block last night to spring a 38-yard run for Will Shipley.
So that's their starting 5. I mean, Mailata's of absolute future Hall of Famer. I think he's awesome. Dickerson's tough as heck. Lane Johnson's going to Canton. So, obviously they had the great center Kelsey for years. but they replaced him with Cam Jurgens, who was a first-round draft choice, or second-round draft.
Second round out of Nebraska.
Okay, so they also have Kenyon Green, who they traded for from Houston. Drew Kendall, whose dad played in the NFL.
They started last night. He's their second-string center already.
Yeah, and he's
as a sixth-round
fifth or sixth-round pick.
Yeah.
And then you got Cam Williams, who was their sixth-round pick out of Texas. So they've got a number of interesting.
They drafted Miles Hinton. They signed Holland Pierce.
They have Trevor Keegan, who used to be the captain of the Michigan Wolverines. They also got Miles Hinton.
Larry,
and Holland
they
Pierce.
Signed, just for the fuck of it, they signed Kendall Lamb and
Matt Pryor, right?
And Matt Pryor, and they have dozens of games of experience starting in the NFL. And they might not make the team. So when I talk about emphasizing the offensive line, this is what I'm talking about. Because if any of the 5 starters on the Niners offensive line goes down, they could be screwed.
Yeah.
You can't scheme your way around
that.
If
2 go down, they may want to just take out their starting quarterback and not play him.
Yes.
It's like, so, but my question, I guess, is at the cut down, who do you think is the best tackle that the Eagles will cut? Will Pierce get cut? Will Hinton get cut? Should the Niners shop the Eagles' cuts for their tackle? Because I don't like Burford or Pleasance anymore.
Yes. And if they come to you on waivers, and it could be a collection of players, it could be veterans like Kendall Lamb and Matt Pryor, realistically. It could be 2 of the 6th-round picks, Cam Williams or Miles Hinton. And it could be Holland Pierce, a UDFA out of Rutgers. All of those players right now are better than the Niners' other options at second and third string. And so, yes, poach those players. And it's also telling, if the Eagles like an offensive lineman with the best offensive line coach in the NFL, follow that intellect, follow that strategy, follow that scouting acumen, and target those guys. As far as Andre Dillard, I know I didn't answer that question, but again, I get fired up about the offensive line because it just holds this team back. Dillard, former first-round pick, played under Mike Leach at Washington State, and it was kind of a surprise that the Eagles drafted him then, but they were looking for a replacement in the future for guys like Lane Johnson, who was getting a little bit older, and at that time, he had these chronic ankle issues that he even said almost caused him to retire. And so the Eagles take Andre Dillard in the first round, and he had played only left tackle at Washington State. Eagles tried to move him to right tackle. He couldn't do it. And he said, when asked about it, have you ever tried to write with your opposite hand? That's what it's like to try to play right tackle when I'm a left tackle. And so there was that thought from him. He had a bad attitude. He was very emotional. He got into some training camp fights. Defenders ruffled his feathers, lost his confidence, and looked to be on his way to being a bona fide bust as a first-round pick. Then he regains that confidence because the Eagles coach him up. Again, Jeff Stoutland, fantastic offensive line coach. And when they had injuries at left tackle, he filled in and played very, very well to the point where you're like, okay, he's really starting to get it together. Then he was going to go into the year as the starter at left tackle. He tore his biceps, and that really derailed his development a little bit. Comes off of that, played well, enough for the Titans to say, hey, former first-round pick, showed some upside, he improved, we'll give him really good money. And they paid Andre Dillard. He was so bad he lasted 1 year out of that contract. Last year went to Green Bay as a backup. And so there have been small moments of good play from Andre Dillard. Moments where you say, you can see why the Eagles drafted him in the first round. But that's probably been about 25 to 35% of overall what he's done as a football player. Can the Niners maximize him? Hey, it is totally possible because the Eagles did there for a moment, and then he went to a bad organization, and it didn't work out for him. So that's kind of the skinny on Andre Dillard. My level of confidence that he's going to step in and be a legitimate backup left tackle, it's not that high, but I will give him credit and say it is possible for him to be better than Spencer Burford and or Austin Pleasance.